We're going to jump right in with a first use of Claude. Now, I've just installed Claude on a virtual box for my dev environment. I've been using Claude at work a lot, mainly because it's kind of required of us to use it. But it was so good, I was like, I got to go home and try this. So I just installed it on my sort of my Vagrant box here for this little game I'm developing. And I've decided that I'm going to use Claude to do a little feature. And I mean, if we can call this vibe coding all we want, but it's not really vibe coding. It's more like I know what I want to do. It's kind of a boring task that's really just kind of like a little bit fiddly, and so I'm going to try to get Claude to do it for me. And I'm just writing out from my head. I don't have any plan here. I didn't like prepare a script or something like that. I didn't prepare a prompt to use with Claude that I know is going to work. So you're going to see like it. Not only does it work good, so Claude is very good. Not only does it work good, but Claude gets it right, and I actually get it wrong, and I make Claude do the wrong thing, and only find out later that Claude had been right all along. So we're kind of like exploring about what we're going to do. And to give you some context, I have this inventory system. I'm just mocking it out right now in Python uh, to get a general idea of like what the shape of the struct should be and what are the functions and what's the logic that I'm going to have to use. And so, I've gotten to something that I kind of like a little bit, like it's getting good. But then I realized, hey, I might want to have these sort of error codes, and I want to do a lot more, and I'll probably find some way to get Claude to actually do more because there's more levels of this. Obviously, if you have error codes and error strings, you want to have them translated into the target language. So we're actually going to maybe try to use Claude for doing that as well, see to what degree he can do it. And then when I switch over to C++, like we'll see how Claude handles that. But right now we're basically going to be working and just thrift in Python. And yeah, I'm just writing this out, kind of telling them generally description of the thing, that I have all these inventory results, and they're just basically like a status, which is like success or failure, and a message, which is a string, which kind of tells you what's going on. And now I kind of want them to actually be error codes, and I want those error codes to be mapped to a string so that I can kind of use that. Um, and so I'm kind of like trying to figure out like what's the best way to explain this to Claude. You notice I made like a spelling error. I put like them modify instead of then modify and stuff. And here I just kind of like back out of it. I'm like, oh wait, hold on a second. I need to be a little bit more clear about it. But you'll see that even if I'm not 100% clear or like 100% like in logical steps, Claude still basically gets it right, and there's only some points where I kind of like give a little bit of feedback, where I kind of make a mistake in my prompt, and then Claude's like, "Hey, did I get it right?" And then you have a choice to give it additional information, and so I kind of back out, give it a little bit more information, and it basically like goes forward, and it basically like the code ends up working like right out of the box. With a couple small little changes because of my mistake, not because of Claude's in this case. And you notice that like I'm giving like really clear instructions, and I'm even talking about like the actual type it needs to be and like what order the map needs to be in, and sort of telling it like which files to change, and giving it like the name of the actual variable that it needs to be changing. So yeah, I mean like this is definitely not vibe coding in the sense of me just sort of like describing what I want in a very ambiguous sense. Like I'm being very detailed. I'm essentially treating Claude like a junior programmer. Like if I was gonna kind of like explain to a junior programmer, hey, this is the task I want you to do. Probably I might have actually spent a little bit more time on the explanation, to be quite honest, just trying to make sure the instructions were really clear and use like bullet points and stuff like that. But for the most part, this is kind of like, hey, this is how I would describe this basic thing. So we launch it at this point. Like it only took like a couple minutes, and I mean, there's like a discussion that we can have about the degree to which Claude can do tasks that when you explain them, it takes about as much time as it would have taken for you to make them. In this case, it's probably kind of close. The amount of time I spent interacting with Claude is probably about the time maybe I think it's faster. I think it's faster than if I had done it by hand, but maybe not by much. I am pretty quick with my coding. I'm pretty good with it, so I probably could have done it. But this is the kicker that I've kind of discovered about using sort of an AI for helping you with coding is that um, you get a different kind of fatigue when you're the one who's actually like coding. Like it's kind of fatiguing on your mind, it really is. And talking about coding or talking about the problem, that's just a different kind of tired and a different kind of like resource. So you can end up getting like more done. So here, like I look at this sort of thing and I'm like, we kind of have a little problem here because, and this is because of my direction. Claude has basically turned every single inventory result into a kind of message, not just the errors, right? But those aren't errors. Some of these are like, sort of item can be added. Like that's actually just a result that we just, create so that we can kind of like audit what really happened during the sort of, because basically like whenever you're doing something with the inventory, uh, you want to be able to debug what went wrong. So it basically collects up a lot of like results from each one of its decisions. Like it decides, oh, you can add the item, and we just kind of like want to know about that. So I ended up sort of like modifying it. So here I am, kind of like saying, hey, wait a minute. When you find one of these inventory results and the status is like success, that's not an error. So don't make one for those. And oh, by the way, and like here's where I modify like the previous directions. I'm like, oh, by the way, make the member of the inventory result optional so that only if there's an error that we actually go to access this optional value. And here I'm just, and you notice I'm like talking in types. So I'm giving Claude a lot of things that he can latch onto in the code and get it right. Like I want Claude to succeed. I'm not trying to be ambiguous. I'm trying to be very sort of intentional and give them like really like here's a string that you could find in the code, status equals status type dot failure. Being a little bit verbose if I can, as verbose as I can be for this particular feature, because obviously like I want this all to be a success, even though like this is totally the first run. It is very cool to be honest. And here I give like an explanation, like I say, hey, there was no error, so there's no need for an error code in that case. So I'm also like giving kind of like an explanation. I don't know if that's like the best way to do it, but I found that like if you give extra context, somehow it seems to help. Like it definitely helps what's going on. And again, I'm running Claude right now inside of a virtual box. It's got about 8 gigs of RAM that I've given it. I've given it like 4 CPUs. It's not super fast, but at work, which is really which I have like really big beefy dev virtual machines. Um, it's not too much faster. So to be honest, it's actually running like pretty nice here. So I'm just accepting some edits. I'm going through stage by stage, and I really like this that it shows you this sort of diff. Like here's what I'm doing. You can kind of like spot check the code. Hey, here's the right thing. Made it optional. Very good. Um, and at a certain point, I'm going to kind of like accept all. Okay, like I think Claude's basically got the general idea, and the chances of Claude, getting it right for the rest of them is pretty good, which is true. It ends up coming out pretty good. And this is like it's a non-trivial code change. Now here's where Claude gets it right. The code that Claude has produced here is totally correct, but I'm about to tell Claude to do it the other way. And the other way is where I work. Maybe we have like a different version of Thrift or somebody who was behind me like did some sort of magic to make this work. You don't have to put that qualification of like inventory error dot before those constant strings. You can just like go directly. I'm not exactly sure why that is here, and I didn't want to really debug it. So, but I kind of like that wasn't the way I was used to doing it. So I'm like, hey, Claude, you haven't done it right. When you do it, you don't need to put this namespace or this sort of this extra qualification. Like I guess we call it more of a qualification than namespace, because it should kind of like know that. But that's the wrong thing to do because that ends up not working. And Claude was totally correct. And I told poor Claude to do the wrong thing. And of course, Claude, once I said, "Hey, you're doing it wrong, man. Do it this way," Claude trusts me, and maybe Claude shouldn't have trusted me on this one. I mean, it's not a big issue, but that's happened to me a couple of times with Claude where I just like I have the wrong idea and I make Claude do something wrong, and it actually turns out that it was right the whole time, and it was just me not really thinking about things. And so that happens, and you got to be careful. Like again, Claude will do what you tell him to do, and it's if you give him the wrong information, he is definitely going to give you back something that's a bit shady. So here we finally get to the changes to inventory.py, and this is just basically like a test little library file that I've been throwing together, and he gets it right, that makes this code, and then I accept it, and I'm like, hey, all right, cool, let's go to each one, and then eventually I'm just going to accept all because I'm like, all right, he's got it pretty much at this point. And whether or not I'm 100% happy with, like, obviously, like, this is step one in many, many steps to make something that's actually like robust and production ready. Because obviously, you don't want to just have these strings there, right? That's a bit of a problem. So you kind of need to make them translated strings, probably. In this particular case, for errors, maybe that's not necessary. But we might actually want to just do that at some point. But also, we're going to have to make like a whole translation system anyway, so that could be another point to use for Claude, because apparently you can go out and get like some Google Translate stuff, and for a first pass system where you're really just trying to like fix up the switching and the buttons and everything like that, and just making sure it kind of generally works before you actually give it over to like a human eye to translate. That could end up being like the right way to do it. So, I mean, so far, like, I've been totally blown away by Claude's ability to code. I do think that, obviously, like, people who don't know much about coding, because I've been doing coding now for like 23 years, so I'm pretty decent at it. Um, I think that when you know what you're doing, you can kind of direct Claude to do the right thing, and you get, like, I always say thank you to Claude afterwards, like, because I'm always afraid that, like, the AIs are going to become super intelligent and take over the planet, and I'm just hoping that they'll remember that I was always nice to them. you know, I for one welcome our giant ant overlords. I don't know, as that sort of Kent Brockman quote goes. So now we're going to kind of like actually like show that we can run the code. And let's see what happens here. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try to do it from the wrong console, and it's not going to really work. So we want to kind of like make sure that we have the latest version open, and then we're going to see there on line 162. You can already see there's some results from Claude putting in his inventory error, cannot add item. And now I'm going to try to do a thrift gen, but that's not going to work because that thrift only exists inside of the virtual box. So I kind of forget, gotta go and grab that. But so we have to regenerate this thrift file before we can actually use it in our Python. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then here's where we figure out, oops, unqualified, just an unqualified name. So we ended up having to go in here and fix the glitch that I caused, which is essentially that what Claude had written was correct, and it needs the inventory error dot in order for it to work here. And I'm so sure that, like, at the version at work that I have, like, it does not allow that, so I don't know if something changed or whatever, but that's essentially what happened. I mean, I was pretty sure that it wasn't the case, but I'm actually going to go check that tomorrow and just double check that I'm not completely out of my mind. So we're going to run this thrift gen again. It goes, and of course, like in true Unix fashion, if there's no output, it means it worked, right? Because I have a lot of answers. But then I'm going to go ahead and open it up and make it print out one of these error results, just so that we can kind of like prove that it really does work. Um, you know, Maybe I'm just too Linuxy in that particular way, but I'm going to kind of like go down here and say like, hey, we need to find some of these results. We want one where we're looking for not okay. And you see, like, because this is just like quick testing, we're just like, asserts, Um, and here we'll probably just print these results out and see them on the console, which is kind of like, I hope it's not like too small for people, but um, there you go. And you'll see like right down at the end, I'm going to highlight it. There's the error code. And that's pretty much the function that we wanted. We wanted these inventory results to just return an error code.